Okay, let's talk about double declining depreciation. If you remember from the straight line depreciation, we took our $27,000 cost, and remember where we subtracted the residual value, and then just divided by 3, and then you had an even amount of depreciation expense for every year. But for double declining, what we're going to do here is we're going to take this cost and we're going to basically accelerate our depreciation, which means I'm going to take a lot more in year 1 than I would in straight line, and then kind of take less as the years go on. So I'm going to build this schedule for you, and really what you want to do here when you're doing double declining is you want to do this schedule in 2 sections. Even though your problem has 1 section with all 3 years, I want you to build this where you split it up into 2 sections. One, basically at the bottom we can start with, which is the final year of the schedule. Do that one separately. And then do the first, in this case it's a 3-year machine, so do the first 2 years in its own box here. So like, for example, if it was a 5-year machine, you do the first 4 years doing the same formulas, and then you do the 5th year differently. This is a 3-year machine, so we're doing the first 2 years with 1 set of formulas, and then we're doing the last year with another formula. And then really all you do is just work down the line here, one by one. So if I look here, with each example, you start with your cost, and at acquisition, when you buy that, did you take any depreciation yet? And the answer is no, you did not. So there's 0 depreciation. And when you buy the thing, it's worth $27,000. Okay, so now each year what I want you to do is say, what is it worth at the beginning of the year? And in this case, that's basically last year's book value, right? So the line right above it, book value is $27,000. You take that, and what you do is you multiply that by 2, just the number 2 every time. It's always 2, divided by the useful life. Since this is a 3-year machine, we divide it by 3. If it was a 5-year machine, you would divide by 5. So I'll show you in the calculator what we're doing here. We're going to take the $27,000, which is that beginning book value. Notice we're not doing the depreciable cost here. We're doing the full book value in double declining. This is the one where you don't do depreciable cost. So we take that full $27,000, look at my calculator, I'm going to go times 2, and I'm going to go divided by 3. And I end up with 18,000. So in order to do that fraction, just do times 2 divided by 3. And now my depreciation expense becomes $18,000 for year 1. Okay, then you just build the schedule just like we did on the other ones. 27,000 minus, what's my accumulated? How much depreciation is accumulated after 1 year of depreciation? Well, it's the same as your year 1 depreciation expense. So put in 18,000 there. And your book value at the end of year 1 is going to be the cost, which is the 27,000 that we spent, minus the 18,000 of accumulated depreciation for $9,000. So see how I built out all of year 1 before calculating year 2's depreciation. So now I go into year 2's depreciation calculation, and I say, hey, what is the beginning book value at year 2? Well, what was the ending book value of year 1? That was $9,000. So I'm going to take that $9,000, I'm going to bring it down as my beginning book value of year 2. And I'm going to get my calculator back up here again. I'm going to go 9,000 times 2 divided by 3. And I end up with $6,000. That's 2/3 of 9,000. $6,000 of depreciation expense in year 2. Again, I bring down the cost. Cost is the same every year, right? The cost doesn't change and the asset value doesn't change. And then what is my accumulated depreciation? You take last year's accumulated plus this year's depreciation expense. So now after 2 years, I have accumulated 24,000 of depreciation. The 18,000 from the first year plus the 6,000 from the second year. Book value then is cost minus accumulated, and you have $3,000 at the end of year 2. So ordinarily you would continue this process for every year up until the final year of the schedule. So if it was a 5-year machine, you would keep just repeating the same process for 2 more years, right? Year 3 and year 4, and then you would do year 5 separately. Since this is a 3-year machine, we're going to do the last year, the final year in the schedule, we're going to do this way, and you do this every time. Basically what you do is you take that beginning book value. Well, at the end of year 2, our book value was $3,000. At the beginning of year 3, that's my book value, $3,000. My residual value is $1,500. I'm going to subtract my residual value. So you can see here, subtract my residual value, which is $1,500. That's given in the facts here. And remember, your whole goal of your depreciation schedule is to end up having my book value to be equal to, and I'm going to fill that out here, $1,500 my residual value. And remember that your accumulated depreciation is supposed to be the amount of the depreciable cost, which if you remember from the other videos is $25,500. Well, here's the deal, right? By doing this little step here, this is the step you do. Beginning book value minus residual value is going to give me my depreciation expense of $1,500 for the last year. If we put this into the formula here, my cost is $27,000. My accumulated depreciation, right, $24,000 plus that $1,500 we calculated equals $25,500. And also, if you think about this, book value $3,000 minus my $1,500 depreciation expense equals my year 3 book value. So you've got to do this step in the final year in order to make these things work. What would happen if we did, this same formula for year 3 that we did in year 2? Well, what would we do? We would take 3,000. I would have 3,000, pretend I have 3,000 in a line right here, and I would multiply that by 2, divided by 3, and that would give me $2,000 of depreciation expense here. The problem with that is, if I had $2,000 of depreciation expense here in year 3, that would make my accumulated depreciation, follow along with me, right? $24,000 last year plus the $2,000 this year would equal $26,000, which is too much. So I can't use the same formula because it doesn't get me to the finish line of the accumulated depreciation equaling my depreciable cost. Remember, you got to know that term, depreciable cost, and my book value equaling my residual value. All right, so then let's just take a quick look at the balance sheet and the income statement. You can see, just like in the other problems, your equipment is going to be the cost as you go through the years, and you can see the accumulated depreciation increasing over time, which basically follows right here in your chart. Here's $18,000 after year 1, $24,000 after year 2, and $25,500 at the end of year 3. And you see the book value is the difference between the cost and the accumulated. Okay, and then here's the depreciation expense for each year. All right, so hopefully that helps you with these problems. You're going to use these same steps for every problem that asks you to do these depreciation methods, so make sure you follow these steps from these videos. Thanks.